Maid heard crying on the wall during Billionaire's wedding. What she discovered, destroyed. Before we get into this story, please do well to subscribe to Folktales Air, and don't forget to let me know where you are watching from. The elders say, when a heart grows too hungry for gold, it forgets the taste of peace. That evening, as the wedding drums rolled across the lush gardens of the Hillcrest estate, no one imagined that a single sound, a woman's sob behind a marble wall, would unravel an empire. The chandeliers shimmered like captured stars above 1,000 guests dressed in silk and champagne tones. Wealth had built this paradise, but behind its beauty lurked a secret darker than nightfall. And in the shadows stood a young maid named Clara, 24 years old, slim, cocoa-skinned, her hair tied neatly beneath a white headscarf, her uniform crisp but worn. She was the kind of woman the world looked past, yet destiny had its eyes fixed on her. Clara had worked at the Hillcrest mansion for 3 years, long enough to know that wealth could be louder than truth. The master of the house, Mr. Adrian Cole, was a man both feared and envied, tall, 52 years old, with silver-edged hair and eyes that had forgotten softness. He was marrying his 3rd wife that night, a radiant woman named Evelyn, elegant and young, whose laughter rang like coins on marble. The guests whispered stories of Adrian's empire built on diamonds, oil, and silent deals sealed in candlelit rooms. But Clara, who polished the floors that mirrored their reflections, had seen things money couldn't hide. She had seen the sadness in Evelyn's eyes when no one looked, and the way Adrian's smile never reached his heart. Still, she kept her head low, obeying the rhythm of her duty. The ceremony stretched late into the night, filled with dance, praise, and champagne that smelled like celebration but tasted like vanity. As Clara carried a tray of glasses across the courtyard, a faint muffled sound drifted through the left wing of the mansion. It was not music, it was not laughter, it was crying, soft, trembling, desperate. She froze. The sound came from behind the thick white wall near the bridal dressing room, an area sealed off to all staff for the night. For a moment she told herself it must be the wind, but no wind sobs with such pain. She leaned closer, pressing her ear gently against the cold marble. "Please, don't do this," a voice whispered between tears. Clara's breath caught. It was a woman's voice. Someone was begging. Her heart pounded like the drums echoing in the distance. She glanced around. No one saw her. The music outside was deafening and the fireworks were beginning to burst over the estate. Every spark in the sky painted fleeting flashes of gold on her face as she stood trembling, unsure whether to run or stay. Curiosity warred with fear. She knew what happened to servants who overstepped boundaries in this house. But the cry behind the wall grew louder, sharper, a cry of someone trapped, helpless. She swallowed hard, whispered a quick prayer beneath her breath, and moved toward the small service passage she had once cleaned. The corridor led to a hidden maintenance door, one even the guards rarely used. Her trembling fingers touched the knob. It was locked. But old habits die hard. Maids often learn how locks listen when spoken to kindly. A soft twist, a careful pull, and the door gave way. The smell of roses mixed with something strange, fear. She stepped inside the dim corridor lit only by faint light spilling through decorative gaps in the marble. The crying had stopped. Silence now wrapped the space like a curse. In the distance, a door clicked shut. Clara held her breath, straining to hear. Then faint footsteps, men's shoes moving quickly away. She waited until they faded, then followed the echo, her slippers whispering on the tiles. At the end of the passage, she saw a half-open door leading to a small storage chamber. Her hands trembled as she pushed it wider. What she saw inside made her throat tighten. A bridal veil lay torn on the floor, pearls scattered like tears, and near the wall, a streak of blood no bigger than a coin. Her tray clattered from her hands. Outside, the guests were cheering for the couple's first dance, but inside that room, something sacred had been broken. And in that moment, Clara knew one thing. The night's beauty had only just begun to rot. The morning after the wedding, the Hillcrest mansion looked like a battlefield dressed in perfume. Rose petals wilted on marble floors, wine stains darkened white linen, and laughter had dried into silence. For most of the staff, it was clean-up day, a day when servants moved like shadows, collecting the leftovers of celebration. But for Clara, the sound behind the wall refused to leave her mind. She kept hearing that soft, desperate voice between every sweep of her broom. The image of the torn veil haunted her. Yet, when she reported to the head housekeeper, Madame Ruth, a woman in her late 50s with a permanent frown and a heart forged by loyalty, she said nothing. In Hillcrest Mansion, silence was the first rule of survival. "Don't think, just work," Ruth always warned. "Those who ask questions here end up without bread." So Clara worked, eyes lowered, but her soul trembled with questions. Later that afternoon, she passed the grand hallway where portraits of Adrian Cole hung like silent judges. In one, he stood beside his late father, both men in tailored suits, eyes proud and cold. Clara often wondered how such men could build fortunes so vast and still look so empty. She glanced toward the courtyard where Evelyn, the new bride, sat under a parasol. Her gown had been replaced by a pale blue dress, her hair loose, her smile practiced. Around her were journalists, snapping pictures of what they called Africa's most elegant union. But even from afar, Clara saw the stiffness in Evelyn's shoulders, the way her hands clenched slightly before every camera flash. There was something trapped behind that beauty, something that trembled like the voice behind the wall. Clara turned away, forcing herself to scrub harder. The world of the rich was a theatre, and she was only the brooms sweeping backstage. When night fell, the mansion glowed again. Guests had gone, but a smaller gathering of Adrian's business partners filled the lounge with smoke and laughter. Clara was assigned to serve them. The men talked about oil fields, land deals, and moving dollars without noise. Their words were heavy with arrogance. Adrian sat at the centre, his silver watch catching the light, his laughter deep but empty. "Gentlemen," he said, raising his glass, "we don't chase money. Money chases us." They roared in approval. Clara lowered her head, refilling their glasses, pretending not to hear. But she couldn't ignore when one of the men, a tall figure in dark glasses, leaned close to Adrian and murmured, "The girl's disappearance is handled. No trace." Adrian's eyes flicked briefly toward the door. "Good," he whispered. "It never happened." Clara froze. She didn't breathe until she left the room. She returned to the servants' quarters, her mind spinning. The girl's disappearance? What girl? Could it be the one behind the wall? That cry, that plea, it wasn't a dream. It was real. Her roommate, Joy, a bright round-faced maid of 22, noticed her silence. "Clara, you look like you've seen a ghost," she teased, tying her scarf. Clara hesitated. She wanted to tell her friend everything, but the mansion had ears. "It's nothing," she said softly, "just tired." Joy laughed. "You always say that. One day your heart will explode from all your secrets." Clara smiled weakly, but her eyes betrayed fear. That night, as she lay on her narrow bed, she watched the ceiling fans spin slowly above her. Each turn whispered the same question. Who was crying behind that wall? Sleep came late. Dreams came darker. The next morning the mansion buzzed again, not with music, but with rumours. A journalist who attended the wedding had vanished on her way home. Her name, Clara later heard, was Diana Wells, a 27-year-old investigative reporter known for exposing corruption. Someone said she had been asking questions about Adrian Cole's mining empire. Someone else swore she had last been seen near the bridal suite. Clara's stomach turned cold. The sound, the blood, the whispers, it all began to form a shape she didn't want to see. She stood alone by the servants' entrance, staring at the golden gates that led to the world outside. "God," she whispered, "if truth is dangerous, then give me courage, because silence is killing me faster." And as the wind rustled the palm leaves around the mansion, it seemed to whisper back, "The truth always finds its way, even through marble walls." End of Chapter 2. Would you like me to proceed with Chapter 3, 1000 words? Where Clara's suspicion deepens, she begins to uncover fragments of the mystery surrounding the missing journalist, and temptation or danger begins to close in around her. The human heart, they say, is like a drum. The more truth it holds, the louder it beats. For Clara, each passing day at Hillcrest Mansion became a rhythm of fear. She could no longer walk past the left wing without hearing that phantom cry in her mind. The laughter of guests, the perfume of wealth, even the polished silver trays, all seemed to hide something rotten. On the third morning after the wedding, Clara was sent to deliver fresh towels to the bridal suite. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the grand door. Sunlight poured through the curtains, bathing the room in gold. But her eyes drifted to the far wall, the same wall from which the crying had come. She moved closer, pretending to dust. Beneath the fresh paint, she noticed something odd. A hairline crack running down the wall's base, faint but visible. She knelt, touching it. A chill ran through her. The marble was new, too new, as if it had been replaced overnight. Suddenly, a voice startled her. "What are you doing there?" It was Evelyn. The young bride stood by the doorway, her beauty softened by fatigue. Clara quickly bowed her head. "Just cleaning, Mom." Evelyn studied her for a moment, then sighed. "They painted that wall yesterday. My husband doesn't like imperfections." Her voice held an ache she couldn't hide. Clara dared to look up. "It's a beautiful room, Mom," she said quietly. Evelyn smiled faintly, but her eyes were distant. "Beauty is sometimes a cage, my dear." With that, she turned and walked to the balcony, her blue gown trailing behind her like sorrow. Clara watched her in silence. That moment planted something in her, not just fear, but empathy. Beneath Evelyn's diamonds, there was a prisoner. That evening, the mansion's atmosphere shifted again. News channels buzzed about Diana Wells' disappearance. Her last article draft had leaked, an unfinished exposé titled The Empire Beneath the Hill. It mentioned Adrian Cole's secret mines in the Congo, exploitation and bribery tied to high-ranking officials. Clara overheard the guards discussing it in hushed tones near the gate. "Boss is furious," one muttered. "Says the leak could cost billions." The other laughed nervously. "Billions, yes, or blood?" Clara walked past them, heart pounding. The puzzle was no longer fog. The woman behind the wall had to be Diana Wells. But if that was true, then Adrian Cole's wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was camouflage for a crime. That night, Clara snuck back toward the corridor again, clutching a small torch she had hidden beneath her apron. The service passage was darker now, the air colder. She traced her fingers along the same marble wall, whispering, "Show me the truth." Her light caught something, faint fingerprints smeared along the edges, almost invisible. Her breath trembled. She pressed her palm against the surface, and for the briefest moment she thought she felt something hollow behind it. She stepped back, heart racing. Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hallway. She turned off her torch and froze. A man appeared, one of Adrian's security guards, broad-shouldered and silent. He passed by without noticing her, but she caught his words over the radio clipped to his belt. "Keep the West Wing locked. The boss said no one goes near the old service door. Orders direct." After he left, Clara's courage cracked. She stumbled back to her room, shut the door, and collapsed onto her bed. Joy stirred. "You again," her roommate murmured sleepily. "Always sneaking around like a cat. What's wrong?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Something bad happened here, Joy. I think someone died." Joy sat up, blinking. "Don't say that. Do you want trouble? You know what they do to people who talk." Clara met her gaze. I can't unhear it. I can't unsee it. If that woman was killed here, I can't stay silent. Joy shook her head. You can't fight rich men. They have money, guards, and power. We only have fear. Clara turned to the window where the city lights blinked like faraway hope. Maybe, she said softly, but sometimes fear is what wakes courage. At dawn, Clara dressed quietly and walked toward the market gate before her shift. She needed answers. In the city below, newspapers screamed about corruption and disappearances. She bought one with the last of her money. On the second page, a small paragraph chilled her. Diana Wells was last seen leaving Hillcrest Estate on the night of Adrian Cole's wedding. Her family offers reward for information. Clara's fingers clenched the paper. The truth was now louder than ever, and so was the danger. She whispered to herself as she looked up at the mansion on the hill, its golden windows shining like eyes watching her. If gold can hide blood, then I will make the world see the stain. Morning sunlight crept across Hillcrest Estate like an intruder afraid to be seen. The mansion looked peaceful, but beneath its marble skin, tension rippled unseen. Clara had spent the entire night thinking of Diana Wells, the journalist whose voice she was sure she had heard behind that wall. Her heart wanted truth, but her body wanted safety. Still, she knew silence was no longer innocence. When she entered the kitchen that morning, her steps felt heavier, as though every tile could remember secrets. Madame Ruth's voice cut through the air. Clara, you'll take lunch to the security quarters today, don't linger. Clara nodded, her hands trembling as she packed the tray. She wasn't afraid of work, she was afraid of what her conscience might make her do next. The path to the security wing passed by the generator house, a place most staff avoided because of the noise and smell. But Clara paused there. Through the iron fence she saw Ben, a tall man in his late 30s, fixing a cable line. He was one of the few guards who treated her kindly. His uniform was worn, his boots dusty, and his eyes carried that same quiet weariness shared by those who served power without ever touching it. You look worried, Clara, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Something wrong? She hesitated, scanning around before whispering, Ben, you've worked here longer than me. Have you ever heard of a journalist called Diana Wells? His hands froze. Where did you hear that name? The news, she lied. They said she was here the night of the wedding. Ben's face darkened. Don't ask questions you can't answer, he murmured. This house eats people who try to expose it. Then, lowering his voice even more, he added, Diana came here once, interviewed the master about his mines. Never left. Clara's breath caught. What do you mean? Never left. He looked away. All I know is 2 men carried something out at dawn the next day, wrapped in cloth. We were told it was decorations. He met her eyes. But decorations don't bleed. For a long moment neither spoke. The hum of the generator filled the silence. You shouldn't be here, he said finally. Go. Forget it. But she couldn't. She felt the truth moving through her like fire. Ben, if someone was hurt, shouldn't we tell the police? He shook his head sharply. Police eat from this table too. You'll end up like her. That night, Clara wrote a letter. The kind you write when your soul has already chosen danger. She didn't know who to send it to yet, but she wanted her truth somewhere outside her heart. If anything happens to me, she wrote, the answer lies behind the West Wing wall. She hid the paper inside the lining of her mattress. As she lay down, thunder rumbled outside, and the rain began to fall like confession. In the distance, the city lights blurred behind the downpour. But inside her, clarity burned bright. Someone had to pay for the blood behind that marble. Days turned into weeks. The news about Diana faded, buried under newer scandals. Evelyn, the new wife, began to appear less in public. Rumour among the staff was that the marriage was already cracking. Adrian travelled often, leaving silence and security men behind. One afternoon, Clara found herself cleaning the upstairs corridor when she noticed Evelyn standing by the balcony again, staring into nothing. She hesitated, then approached slowly. "Madam, are you all right?" she asked softly. Evelyn turned, her face pale. "Do you ever feel like this house listens?" she asked. Clara blinked. "Listens?" Evelyn nodded, whispering. "Sometimes I hear things at night. Voices. Crying." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat truth passed between them like lightning. Evelyn stepped closer. "If you hear it too, don't tell anyone. It's safer that way." Clara swallowed hard. "What did you hear, Mom?" Evelyn looked away. "A woman begging." That night, Clara prayed longer than she ever had before. Her mother used to say, when the ancestors want justice, they wake the heart of a servant. Clara didn't know if it was bravery or foolishness that burned inside her now. But she knew one thing. The mansion had begun to tremble with its own lies. And somewhere behind those walls, a secret waited for her to dig it out, even if it buried her too. They say curiosity is a candle, bright enough to find truth, but dangerous enough to burn its own hand. For Clara, that flame had grown uncontrollable. Each night she dreamed of walls whispering, of marble bleeding, of a woman calling her name through echoes of thunder. She would wake drenched in sweat, her heart galloping, the sound of the cry still fresh in her mind. The next morning when she entered the kitchen, the air felt different, heavy, suspicious. Madame Ruth's voice sliced through it. "Clara, come here." Her tone was sharper than usual. Clara stepped forward, wiping her palms on her apron. "Yes, Ma'am." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "Who gave you permission to speak to the security men 2 days ago?" The question froze her. I was only delivering lunch." Ruth leaned closer. "Don't play innocent. Mr. Cole doesn't like staff wandering. You're new enough to forget that walls here have ears." Ruth's gaze lingered for a long time before she finally waved her away. But Clara's stomach tightened with unease. Someone had seen her talking to Ben. That meant her questions weren't secrets anymore. That night, when she went to bring Ben food near the generator room, he wasn't there. His bed was empty, his locker open, his name tag gone. "Transferred," another guard said when she asked. Boss didn't like how talkative he was. But Clara knew what that meant. Ben hadn't been transferred. He had been silenced. She returned to her quarters that evening with tears burning behind her eyes. She wanted to pack her things and leave, but fear chained her. People didn't just walk away from Adrian Cole's mansion, not when they'd seen too much. The next morning, she noticed something strange. Madame Evelyn's door was locked from the outside. Guards stood near it. "The madam isn't feeling well," one muttered when she passed. But later that night, Clara heard muffled voices again. Not from behind the same wall this time, but from the main hall. Adrian's tone was icy. "She's asking too many questions," he said. "The maid, Clara. Handle it quietly. I don't want any noise before the investors visit," a man replied. "Understood, sir." Clara's heart dropped. She stumbled backward into the dark, one hand over her mouth to keep from gasping aloud. Her name, spoken like a sentence. She turned and fled down the servant corridor, her breath shallow, her slippers barely touching the floor. When she reached her room, Joy was half asleep. "What's wrong?" she mumbled. "We have to leave," Clara whispered. "Tonight." But Joy only frowned, confused. "You've been hearing things again. You'll get us both in trouble." Clara grabbed her hand. "Please, they're coming for me." Joy sighed. "You always exaggerate. Sleep. Everything will look different by morning." Clara lay awake the whole night, staring at the ceiling, listening to footsteps patrol outside. Around 2 a.m., she heard a door slam somewhere down the hall. Heavy boots approached. Her chest tightened. She reached under her mattress for the letter she'd written, the one that held her secret. But when she felt the fabric, her hand froze. The letter was gone. Her blood turned cold. Someone had been inside her room. She looked toward the window. A faint shadow moved past it, then vanished. Her breath came shallow, quick, terrified. At dawn, she rose, trembling. Madam Ruth called her again, this time with an eerie calm. "You're to clean the west wing this morning," she said. Clara blinked. "The west wing is locked." Ruth's lips curled slightly. "Not today." She turned and walked away, her heels echoing like warning bells. Clara stood frozen. It was a trap. She felt it. But what choice did she have? Refuse, and suspicion would double. Obey, and she'd walk into the mouth of danger. She whispered a prayer beneath her breath, the same words her mother once taught her. Even in the lion's den, God watches his own. Then she lifted her broom, steadied her shaking hands, and stepped toward the forbidden corridor. As she entered the west wing, the silence felt thick enough to choke. Every step echoed like confession. The lights flickered above her. At the end of the corridor stood the wall. That same wall, now flawless again, gleaming white. She reached out and placed her hand upon it. Cold, still, but she could feel something beneath, something that wasn't at peace. Behind her a door creaked softly. She turned. A man stood there, tall, expressionless, in a black suit. "Mr. Cole wants to see you," he said. Power, when dressed in calmness, is the most dangerous form of threat. As Clara followed the man through the West Wing corridor, her heartbeat thundered like war drums in her chest. The hallway was long and silent, lit by golden sconces that glowed like captive fire. At the end stood Adrian Cole, tall and commanding, framed by a massive window that overlooked the estate. His reflection shimmered against the glass, a man who had built empires from shadows. "Clara," he said softly without turning. His voice was deep, too calm, too measured. "Do you know why I called you here?" She swallowed hard. "No, sir." He turned slowly, smiling. It wasn't the kind of smile that comforted. It was the kind that disarms. "You've been curious," he said. "That's rare for someone in your position." His tone carried an almost fatherly warmth that felt wrong. Clara lowered her gaze. "I only do my work, sir," Adrian chuckled. "Your work, yes, but sometimes work makes us see things we shouldn't." He walked closer, his expensive cologne filling the air. "Do you believe everything you hear, Clara?" "No, sir," she whispered. "Good," he said, stopping inches away. "Then believe this. Loyalty is wealth, and silence is survival." His words slid into her like a knife wrapped in silk. Then his expression changed, his voice softened again. "You're young, intelligent, and loyal. I see potential in you. Would you like a better life?" Clara blinked. "Sir," he gestured toward the window. "Look out there. All of this can belong to people who understand how the world works. I reward those who protect my name." His smile deepened. "Tell me, Clara, what did you hear the night of my wedding?" Her throat tightened. This was the test, the trap disguised as kindness. "Nothing, sir," she said quietly. His gaze lingered on her face, searching for cracks. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Good. Let's keep it that way." He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and placed an envelope on the table. "Take this," he said. "A token of appreciation for your service. You've been loyal. I like loyalty." She didn't move. He smiled again. "Go on. Take it." Trembling, she reached for the envelope. It was thick. Too thick. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "You may go," he said softly, turning back to the window. "And Clara, remember, curiosity may look like courage, but in this house it's suicide." She left the room with her hands shaking. The envelope felt heavy, almost guilty in her grasp. When she returned to her quarters, she tore it open. Stacks of fresh Naira notes spilled out. Enough to change her life. For a brief moment, temptation drowned her fear. She thought of her mother's old house, the leaking roof, her siblings' school fees. But the joy was short-lived. Inside the envelope was also a small folded note in Adrian's handwriting. "The dead don't speak, neither should you." Her stomach twisted. This wasn't a reward. It was a warning sealed in blood money. She clutched the cash, tears blurring her vision. God, she whispered, why show me truth if I must live afraid of it? That night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak in the corridor felt like footsteps coming for her. Every shadow looked like Ben's ghost. She remembered Adrian's eyes, sharp, calculating, and his promise of a better life. That was the moment she understood the kind of power she was facing. A man who destroyed and rewarded with the same hand. When dawn broke, she walked outside and sat beneath the mango tree near the servants' quarters. Joy joined her, yawning. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at the envelope. Clara shook her head. "A curse," she whispered. Joy laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Clara's face didn't change. By evening, Evelyn called for her. It was the first time the new bride had spoken directly since the wedding. Clara entered her room and froze. Evelyn's eyes were swollen, her voice weak. "He trusts you," she said. "That's why you're still alive." Clara frowned. "Mom," Evelyn leaned closer. "He killed her, the journalist. I tried to stop him. That's why he keeps me locked away." Clara's breath caught. "Why are you telling me this?" Evelyn smiled sadly. "Because I can't leave. But you can." She pressed a small flash drive into Clara's hand. "Take it. It has her files, her recordings. If you ever escape this place, give it to someone who can end him." Clara's heart pounded. "Mom, if he finds out—" "He already knows everything," Evelyn whispered. "The question is, do you know who you are to him?" Before Clara could ask, Evelyn's door creaked open. Madame Ruth's shadow appeared. "What are you two whispering about?" she asked coldly. Evelyn straightened. "Nothing, Ruth, just thanking the maid." Ruth's eyes moved between them. "Good. We wouldn't want misunderstandings." She turned and left, her presence heavy as thunder. Evelyn's lips trembled. "Go, Clara. Before he finds a new wall to hide another body." Clara slipped the flash drive into her pocket, heart racing. That night, thunder rolled across the sky again, the same sound that had once carried the cries behind the wall. But this time, Clara wasn't just listening, she was holding proof. And for the first time, fear wasn't the only thing inside her chest. There was also resolve. The storm that night did not fall from the sky alone. It raged inside the walls of Hillcrest Mansion. Clara sat in her small room, the flash drive hidden beneath the sole of her left shoe. Every drop of rain that hit the roof above her sounded like a countdown. She could not eat, could not sleep, could barely breathe. She replayed Evelyn's trembling words again and again in her head. He already knows everything. That single sentence gnawed at her sanity. If Adrian knew, then every second she stayed alive was mercy on borrowed time. Yet she couldn't run. The gates were guarded, the staff watched. She was a bird in a golden cage. Still, even birds learn how to sing through the bars. She pulled out an old phone from her drawer, one she had saved from her first salary, and whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll find a way to send this." At dawn, the mansion returned to its false peace. The sky was clear, the gardens glittered after the storm, and guests began arriving for a charity breakfast Adrian had, organised to polish his public image. Clara moved quietly among the staff, carrying trays, smiling as required. But her eyes kept searching for an opening. The main gate was crawling with guards. Her only chance would be the delivery van that left every afternoon for the market. If she could slip the flash drive to the driver, a kind old man named Tunde. Perhaps it could reach someone outside. But fate had other plans. As she crossed the corridor, Madame Ruth appeared, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Clara," she said, "the master wants to see you. Now." Clara's stomach turned. Again? She followed Ruth through the grand hall, her steps heavy. Inside Adrian's study, sunlight sliced through half-drawn blinds, striping the room in gold and shadow. Adrian sat behind his desk, expression unreadable. "Clara," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been thinking about our last conversation." She hesitated. Sir? He smiled faintly. You see, trust is expensive, and lately I've been hearing whispers that trouble me. He stood, walked around the desk, and placed a hand on her shoulder. I know everything that happens in this house. Every step. Every word. His hand lingered. Where is it? He whispered. Where is what, sir? She managed to ask. His grip tightened. The thing Evelyn gave you. Her heart stopped. I don't know what you mean. His eyes hardened. Don't lie to me, Clara. It doesn't suit you. He stepped back, straightened his suit, and signaled to Ruth. Search her. Ruth stepped forward slowly, her face blank. Madam Ruth, please, Clara begged, but Ruth didn't meet her eyes. I told you once, she murmured. The walls here have ears. She patted down Clara's uniform, searched her pockets, her scarf, her apron, but found nothing. Adrian's jaw tightened. Check the quarters. Tear it apart if you have to. Ruth nodded and left. Adrian leaned close again. You've disappointed me, he said quietly. You could have been someone important, but you chose to betray me for a woman who doesn't even love herself. He smiled coldly. Do you know why Evelyn stays? Because she understands the price of comfort. His words were poison, smooth and seductive. You can still choose to be wise. Bring me that drive and I'll forget all this ever happened. Clara met his gaze, tears threatening. Even if I did, would you forget her blood? His expression froze. The silence between them turned sharp. Then he whispered, Careful, Clara. You're beginning to sound like the dead. That night, Ruth returned to the servants' quarters. The room was upside down, drawers open, mattress slashed, clothes scattered. We didn't find anything, she told Clara flatly. You should pray that makes you lucky. Clara wanted to hate her, but when she looked closely, she saw fear. Real fear, trembling behind the older woman's eyes. Why are you doing this? Clara asked softly. Ruth's voice cracked. Because I've seen what happens when people try to fight him. I once tried to leave. My husband disappeared the next week. Tears filled Clara's eyes. So you help him hide the dead? Ruth looked away. I help the living survive. Then she walked out, leaving the door open to the cold night. Clara sank to her knees, shaking. The mansion was no longer a home of secrets. It was a graveyard disguised as gold. Just before dawn, Clara slipped out quietly and made her way toward the garage. The air was heavy with dew, her heart heavier with dread. Tunda, the old driver, was loading supplies. She whispered his name. He turned, surprised. Clara! What are you doing here this early? She pressed the flash drive into his calloused hand. Please, she said, her voice trembling. If anything happens to me, take this to a journalist named Mrs. Adeniyi at the Daily Post. His eyes widened. Child, what is this? The truth, she whispered. Before he could reply, footsteps echoed behind them. 2 guards approached. Clara smiled quickly. Thank you, sir, she said loudly, pretending to adjust her tray. The guards barely noticed her as she walked away, but when she looked back, she saw Tunde slip the flash drive into his shirt pocket. For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope crossed her chest. But hope, in Hillcrest Mansion, was a dangerous thing to carry. By morning, Hillcrest Mansion was eerily calm, too calm, like the silence after a confession. The sun rose shyly over the estate, painting soft gold across the trimmed hedges and the glittering pool. Clara tried to act normal, polishing silver trays, wiping down glass, but her hands trembled with every motion. The flash drive was gone from her shoe, now in Tunde's pocket, on its way to freedom. For the first time, she dared to hope that perhaps this nightmare would end. But hope in that mansion was like water in a basket. It never lasted. Around noon, a convoy of black SUVs rolled into the courtyard. Men in suits emerged, their faces expressionless. Adrian Cole stepped out last, wearing dark sunglasses, his aura heavier than the vehicles that carried him. Gather all staff, Madam Ruth shouted. Now! Her voice quivered as she spoke. Within minutes, Everyone stood in a line under the hot sun. Cooks, cleaners, guards, drivers. Adrian's tone was calm but chilling. "This morning," he said, "a confidential item went missing from my office. I expect loyalty from my people, not betrayal." He paced slowly, hands behind his back. "If anyone here has seen or touched what belongs to me, speak now, and I'll forgive. Stay silent, and you'll regret it." His words hung heavy in the air. No one moved. Then one of the guards whispered something into his ear. Adrian's gaze turned toward the garage. "Where's Tunder?" Silence. "Find him," he ordered. The men scattered. Clara felt her chest tighten. She looked down, biting her lip so hard it bled. Within the hour, word spread. Tunder's van had been found by the old bridge, engine running, door open. But Tunder was gone. Clara's world tilted. Her breath came short. She stumbled into the laundry room and collapsed against the wall, tears spilling freely. She had doomed him. A man who only wanted to help her was now missing. Maybe dead. "God," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why does the truth kill the innocent?" Her sobs echoed off the tiled walls, but the mansion swallowed them like it did all cries. When she finally returned to her quarters, Joy was waiting. "Clara," she whispered urgently, "they're searching rooms again. They think you helped Tunder." Clara's knees nearly gave way. "I didn't mean to—" "Shh," Joy hissed. "Don't talk here. They might be listening." She handed Clara a small bag. "Take this and go, through the back fence near the kitchen garden. I'll distract them." Clara's eyes widened. "If they catch you—" Joy smiled faintly. "Better me than both of us." It was after midnight when Clara crept toward the back garden. The moonlight fell softly on the wet grass, the air heavy with the scent of flowers that smelled too sweet for such a night. Her footsteps were silent, but her heart was thunder. She reached the wire fence and began pulling it apart, inch by inch. Just as she slipped through, a voice said behind her, "Going somewhere?" She froze. It was Adrian. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, and that made it worse. "You disappoint me," he said. "I gave you a chance to choose loyalty." He stepped closer. "Do you know what loyalty means, Clara?" She turned, trembling. "It means silence," she said. "No," he replied coldly. "It means obedience." He nodded slightly, and 2 guards stepped out of the shadows. "Take her to the basement," he said. They dragged her back into the mansion, down a narrow staircase that smelled of damp earth and rot. The basement was cold, windowless, and filled with old furniture covered in sheets. They threw her to the floor. Adrian followed, his shoes echoing against the cement. "Do you think the world cares about justice?" he asked, pacing slowly. "People worship power, not truth. I built this empire because I understood that." He crouched beside her, eyes glinting. "You could have been rich, Clara. You could have lived in silk. Instead, you chose to be a martyr. Martyrs die poor." She looked up at him, tears streaking her face. "You can hide truth under marble, but it still screams." His expression darkened. "Not when I bury the one who heard it." He stood, turned to the guards and said, "Make it look like she ran away." Then he left, his footsteps fading up the stairs. One guard hesitated. "Boss said no marks," the other muttered. "Then let's finish it clean." Clara closed her eyes as one of them raised a length of rope. But before it touched her, a loud noise cracked through the silence. A bang from above, followed by shouting. The guards paused, glancing at each other. Another bang, this time closer. "Something's happening upstairs," one said. "Go check." The other ran out. Clara seized her chance. With trembling hands, she grabbed a broken piece of glass from the floor and slashed at the rope binding her wrists. It cut deep into her skin, but freedom burned stronger than pain. She staggered to her feet, heart racing, and stumbled toward the dark corner where a rusted service door stood. She pushed it. It gave way. The rain outside hit her face like resurrection. She ran barefoot through the gardens, mud splashing, breath ragged, tears mixing with storm water. Behind her, alarms began to wail. Headlights flashed, voices shouted. But Clara didn't stop. She didn't look back. For the first time since she entered Hillcrest Mansion, she was not a maid. She was a survivor. The city received her like a wound, open, raw, and unhealed. For 3 days, Clara wandered barefoot through the outskirts of Lagos, her white maid's uniform now grey with mud and rain. Every sound made her flinch, every passing car felt like danger. She had escaped the mansion, but she could not escape her memories. The cries, the blood, Tunde's face, Ben's silence, all haunted her steps. On the third night, she found shelter beneath an unfinished building, surrounded by strayed dogs and broken bottles. She clutched her torn apron like a shield and prayed through chattering teeth. "Lord, if you brought me out, don't leave me halfway." Sleep came in fragments, sharp, heavy, haunted. Morning broke with the noise of a market nearby, the smell of fried plantain, the shouts of traders, the music of life that didn't know her name. She gathered the courage to approach a small roadside food stall. The woman there, middle-aged with kind eyes and an easy smile, looked at her pitiful state. "Sister, you look like thunder itself beat you," she said. Clara forced a weak smile. "Please, water." The woman handed her a bottle. "You from the estate up the hill?" she asked. Clara froze. "Why?" "They've been searching for one of their girls," the woman replied. "Said she stole something important and ran away." Clara's heart tightened. "Do you believe them?" she asked. The woman shrugged. "In this country, rich people never steal. It's always the poor who get blamed." She handed Clara a plate of rice. "Eat first, talk later." For the first time in days, Clara ate real food, tears mixed with each bite. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman smiled. "Call me Mama Chinyere. You can stay here a night or two, but after that you need a plan." Clara nodded. "I have to find someone," she said softly. "A journalist named Mrs. Adini, the Daily Post." Mama Chinyere frowned. "That's in Victoria Island, far from here. But maybe God sent you here for a reason." She handed Clara an old shawl. "Cover yourself. Evil men hunt women who look lost." Those words carried a strange weight. Clara wrapped the shawl around herself, blending into the crowd. She had no phone, no money, no proof, only faith, and the small fire still burning inside her. As she made her way toward the bus park that afternoon, the sound of a radio caught her ear from a nearby stall. "Breaking news," the announcer said. "Authorities have begun investigating alleged financial misconduct involving billionaire businessman Adrian Cole, following leaked documents sent anonymously to several media houses." Clara froze. "Leaked documents?" The voice continued. "Sources suggest the evidence includes voice recordings and photographs linked to the disappearance of journalist Diana Wells. Mr. Cole has denied all allegations." The world blurred around her. The flash drive. Tunde had done it. The man she thought she'd doomed had fulfilled her mission before vanishing. Tears flooded her eyes. People around her barely noticed the trembling woman standing by the roadside whispering, "He did it. He did it." But victory came at a cost. That night, as she hid in a rundown hostel, she turned on an old television in the lobby. The news displayed Adrian Cole's face, still confident, still smiling, but behind his eyes Clara saw fear. The reporter said he had been summoned for questioning. Evelyn, the wife, was said to have travelled abroad for medical reasons. Clara knew that was a lie. She pressed her palms together and whispered, "God, if justice has begun, don't let it stop." Yet deep inside, guilt gnawed at her. The dead still whispered in her dreams. Diana's voice, Ben's warning, Tunde's disappearance, all of them echoing through her mind. She asked herself if freedom always required blood. In the days that followed, Clara began rebuilding herself. She found small jobs cleaning shops, sweeping floors, selling sachet water. She hid her name, cut her hair short, and started calling herself Grace. But every night she still prayed for the truth to finish what it had started. Weeks passed and rumours grew louder. Adrian's empire was collapsing. Banks froze his accounts, politicians withdrew support, and angry investors began circling like vultures. People said he had gone mad, seeing shadows and hearing voices. Clara would stand by the window of her tiny rented room, watching the rain fall, whispering, "You can bury a body, but not a conscience." And though fear still followed her, she began to walk straighter, slower, stronger. One evening, as she packed up after work, a black car stopped beside the curb. A window rolled down slowly. A familiar female voice said, "You've been hard to find." Clara froze. It was Evelyn, dressed in plain clothes, her face thinner, older. "Get in," she said, softly. "We have unfinished business." The car's interior smelled of fear and perfume. Clara sat in silence, her hands trembling on her lap, as the city lights flashed through the tinted windows. Evelyn sat beside her, expression unreadable. The driver said nothing. Only the hum of the engine filled the air. "You look thinner," Evelyn said softly. "The city hasn't been kind to you." Clara turned toward her, anger flickering behind exhaustion. "You knew he would kill me." Evelyn sighed. "Yes, and he almost did." Her eyes were hollow, her voice calm in a way that frightened Clara more than shouting ever could. "I stayed to survive, not to save. But when I saw what he did to Diana, to you, I knew survival was another kind of death." They stopped at a secluded house in Lekki. Inside, the furniture was sparse, the air heavy with quiet. Evelyn poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Clara. "You've been watching the news?" she asked. Clara nodded. "He's being investigated." Evelyn smirked faintly. "Investigated, yes, but not yet defeated. Men like Adrian never fall quietly. They take others down with them." She reached into her purse and slid a brown envelope across the table. "These are copies of the original contracts Diana was after. Names of politicians, shell companies, payments, everything. She trusted me with them before she died. I never had the courage to release them. But you've already done what I couldn't." Clara hesitated, opening the file. The pages trembled in her hands. "If this gets out," she said, "he'll never recover." Evelyn nodded. "That's the point." But as they spoke, far away in Hillcrest Mansion, Adrian's empire was already imploding. His companies were under audit, his bank accounts frozen, and his face filled every news channel, no longer as a symbol of power, but as a man cornered by his own greed. Inside his study, he smashed a glass against the wall. "Who did this to me?" he roared. Ruth stood trembling at the door. "Sir, please, don't speak," he thundered. "I gave the world everything it wanted. Jobs, donations, hospitals, and this is how it repays me." He paced, wild-eyed. "Find Evelyn. Find the MAID. I want them both erased." His voice cracked with rage, but beneath it was fear. The first sound of a god realizing he could bleed. Back in the safe house, Evelyn leaned against the wall, exhaustion overtaking her. "He'll come for us," Clara said. "Then let him," Evelyn replied, eyes cold. "The truth is already free." Suddenly, a car screeched outside. Both women froze. Clara moved to the window. Headlights glared through the rain. Evelyn whispered, "He found us." A loud knock echoed at the door. Clara's heart raced. "We have to run." Evelyn opened a drawer and handed her a small pistol. "Take it," she said. "If we die tonight, let it be fighting." But before Clara could respond, a voice shouted from outside, "Police! Open up!" Evelyn's face went pale. "Or pretending to be police," she murmured. Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Trust me." She slipped toward the back door while Evelyn opened the front. Within seconds, heavy boots stormed in, shouts filling the air. Clara ran into the alley, rain pounding her face as she vanished into the dark. By dawn, the house was empty. Evelyn was gone. No trace, no body, no sound. The news later reported that an unidentified woman had been found unconscious near the shore, presumed dead. Clara refused to believe it. She watched from the crowd as reporters swarmed outside the courthouse where Adrian Cole was finally brought in for questioning. His once perfect suit was wrinkled, his silver hair dishevelled. Yet, even in defeat, he tried to look composed. The reporters shouted questions. "Did you kill Diana Wells? What happened to your third wife? Where is the missing maid?" Adrian smirked faintly, adjusting his cufflinks. "No one stays loyal anymore," he said before stepping inside. That evening, Clara stood at a bus terminal with a small bag in hand. She had no destination and only peace to chase. The world around her moved fast, but inside, she felt still. The mansion that once caged her was now a ghost in headlines. The man who once frightened her was now a prisoner of his own greed. She thought of all the voices that had been silenced, Ben, Tunde, Diana, Evelyn, and whispered, "Your truth lives." As the bus engine roared, she looked out at the fading city skyline. Somewhere, justice had begun to move, slow, imperfect, but real. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. When truth finally decides to walk, it does not knock. It breaks the door. The next morning, Lagos awoke to the sound of chaos and justice sharing the same breath. News stations, blogs, and radio channels blared with a single headline. Exclusive leaks reveal billionaire Adrian Cole's secret empire of blood. The recordings were everywhere. Diana Wells's voice, faint but fierce, interviewing Adrian himself, exposing the underworld of mining abuse, bribery, and murder buried beneath the glamour of Hillcrest. Her words trembled but never broke. Some riches are not earned. They are taken from the bones of the poor. The nation roared. Protesters gathered outside his mansion. Investors fled. Former allies released statements overnight, claiming ignorance. The empire that once touched the sky began to crumble from its own foundation. In a small room in Surulere, Clara sat before a cracked television, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. The world had finally heard the cry behind the wall. Every secret she carried, every pain she buried. It was now echoing across Africa. She clutched her hands together, whispering, "Thank you, God, you never sleep." But her joy was heavy with sorrow. The price of this. Justice had been steep. She turned off the TV, walked to the window, and looked out at the busy streets. Children laughed, vendors argued, life continued. Yet deep inside her, something shifted. The fear that had once caged her had melted into strength. She realized that she was no longer the maid who hid behind walls. She was the voice that had brought them down. At Hillcrest Mansion, Adrian Cole sat in darkness. The curtains were drawn, the air thick with despair. The once proud man who built an empire with greed now sat surrounded by silence. His phone rang endlessly, calls from lawyers, journalists, and former partners. But he didn't answer. On the table lay a newspaper with his face on the front page, beneath the headline, "Billionaire arrested for murder and fraud." He picked it up slowly, staring at his own photograph. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a voice cracked by exhaustion, he muttered, "They loved me when I fed them. They cursed me when I fell." He laughed bitterly. Even God must enjoy this performance. He poured himself a drink, hands trembling. But when he looked at his reflection in the glass, he saw not power, only a man haunted by the ghosts of those he destroyed. For the first time, Adrian Cole wept. Days later, the court sessions began. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, crowds gathered. Clara watched from a distance, her scarf pulled low over her face. She wanted to see it with her own eyes. Not revenge, but truth standing upright in daylight. Evelyn was alive, though frail, and appeared in court with quiet grace. Her testimony was devastating. Names, accounts, hidden documents, all laid bare. When asked how she got the files, she said softly, "A maid who believed in God more than fear." Adrian turned in his seat then, his gaze finding Clara at the back of the courtroom. Their eyes met for a single heartbeat. The hunter and the hunted, the rich and the forgotten. There was no hatred between them now, only recognition. He bowed his head. The gavel struck. The verdict. Guilty on all counts. The hall erupted in noise, but Clara felt only stillness inside. Afterward, Evelyn approached her outside the courthouse. Her steps were slow, her eyes wet. "You saved more lives than you'll ever know," she said. Clara shook her head. "I just told the truth." Evelyn smiled faintly. "That's the hardest thing to do." She reached into her bag and handed Clara a folded piece of paper. "From Diana's notebook," she said. "She wrote it before she came to Hillcrest." The paper read, "If I die chasing the truth, let it not be buried with me." Clara held it close to her heart. "She didn't die in vain," she whispered. Evelyn nodded, tears falling. "And neither did we." They stood together as the rain began to fall, the same kind of rain that once carried fear, now washing the earth clean. That evening, as thunder rolled over the city, Clara walked through the streets of Lagos barefoot, her shawl fluttering behind her like wings. People around her hurried for shelter, but she let the rain fall freely on her face. She whispered into the wind, "The dead don't sleep when truth is unfinished, and today they can finally rest." In the distance, a church bell rang, its echo weaving through the hum of the city. For the first time in her life, she felt peace. Not the fragile kind that hides in silence, but the kind that lives in truth. End of chapter 11. Would you like me to continue with the final chapter 12, or 1,000 words, the resolution and moral reflection, where Clara's journey concludes in poetic justice, forgiveness, and an ending that leaves the audience in awe and reflection, closing with a proverb-like moral line? They say when God decides to expose evil, even marble walls turn to mirrors. Weeks after Adrian Cole's conviction, the mansion that once symbolized pride stood abandoned. Its gates rusted, its gardens wild, its silence loud. Locals said at night, lights still flickered through its shattered windows, and faint cries echoed from its halls. The cries of those whose truth had been buried too long. But to Clara, Hillcrest was no longer a place of fear. It was a grave for lies, and graves were meant to teach the living. She stood outside its gate one last time, holding a single white rose. The wind carried the faint scent of rain. "You buried voices here," she whispered, "but God turned them into thunder." She laid the rose by the gate and walked away, her steps slow but sure. In the months that followed, Clara's story spread quietly across the city, not through headlines, but through whispers. Market women told it while selling fruits, pastors quoted it from pulpits, and students debated it in crowded dorm rooms. The maid who brought down a billionaire, they called her. But Clara didn't chase recognition. She had seen what power could do to the soul. She found work with a non-profit that supported women escaping abusive employers. Each time she met a frightened girl, she would smile and say softly, "Your voice is not too small. It just needs to find the right wall to echo through." Her eyes always glistened when she said it. Pain had not broken her. It had refined her. One afternoon, as she returned from work, a young reporter stopped her near the bus stop. "Miss Clara?" he asked, holding a camera. She hesitated. "Yes?" "I'm writing a story about Hillcrest, about the courage it took to speak when silence was safer. The people need to know your name." She smiled faintly. "Names fade," she said, "but truth doesn't." She declined the interview, boarded the bus and looked out the window as the city rolled by. Billboards of Adrian's seized properties flashed past her. Banks, hotels, oil firms, all now owned by the government. The world had taken everything from him, yet the only thing that truly destroyed him had been his own greed. Clara whispered to herself. He built walls to keep others out, and those walls became his prison. Months later, Evelyn reappeared, thinner, quieter, but alive. They met at a small cafe overlooking the lagoon. The water glimmered under the afternoon sun. "He's gone," Evelyn said softly. "Heart attack in prison." Clara said nothing for a moment. "Did he ever ask for forgiveness?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "He did, in the end. He said he dreamed of the maid who heard crying in his walls, said she stood by his cell every night." Clara closed her eyes. The dead never stopped calling him. Evelyn reached across the table and took her hand. "You gave peace to ghosts, Clara. Maybe now you can find yours." They sat in silence, two women once broken by the same monster, now free in different ways. Outside, seagulls flew over the water like white flames, unburdened and alive. That night, as the city lights shimmered across the lagoon, Clara stood by her window and thought about everything. The laughter that once mocked her, the fear that once ruled her, and the courage that once felt like madness. She whispered a quiet prayer for all who still served behind walls of silence, for all who thought truth was too dangerous to speak. Then she said the words her mother used to say whenever darkness seemed endless. "God may delay, but he never forgets." The wind outside grew gentle, carrying her words into the night. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, not in anger this time, but in remembrance. End of story. Moral reflection. The heart that stays honest will never remain poor forever. Some walls are not built to protect secrets. They are built to wait for truth to arrive.